So if you're watching this video, it's because one of your tracks was actually accepted onto an opportunity for Library X, and I just want to say congratulations. I'm really excited for you. If this is your first one, extra congratulations. Really, really cool. Now, here's the part where you need to be making sure that you prove yourself to be a professional in the licensing business, because this is going to be something you'll have to get really good at and pay attention to and get the details right for any music library or opportunity in the future. So the guidelines that I'm giving you for our opportunities are pretty strict, very specific. Some libraries won't be as strict, won't be as specific, and they'll just say, send us your stems and we'll take care of everything, right? Others might have you do all of this. So it's really important that you just get trained and understand how to deliver your alt mixes, your cut downs, and your stems the right way, in the right format, labeled the right way, following directions, etc., so that no matter who you work with in the future, you've already got this training and you'll be able to nail it for them. And before we get started, I just want to make sure that whatever you do as you bounce your finals, your cut downs, your stems, make sure that you go back to your files and listen to them, at least scanning through them to check for any major errors before you submit them on to me. If I find errors, that means I have to do homework. That means I have to go back and ask you, oh, can you please redo this? Can you please redo that? This isn't working, that's not working. And that is going to be more of a headache for me, more work for me, and it really is not fun for me to do. This should be something that you guys get right the first time, and in order to make sure you do that, be professional by double checking your bounces and just making sure, like if you bounce a 30-second, make sure it actually is 30 seconds. Okay, sometimes I get 30 seconds that are 33, 31, 29. They need to be exactly 15, 30, and 60. Okay, make sure you get the right formats right. Wave, 24-bit, 48K. Okay, not 44.1, which is what a lot of people are delivering. Make sure it's 48K. It's a pretty popular standard in the licensing business. So all of the sort of naming and track specifics can be found on the post that you got to this video through. So always refer to that one if you need to know, how do I label, my stems, or how do I label my cut downs or my full version. Always label that and follow those directions to a T. So if I put a capital letter for the full portion, use that exact naming convention. If you need to capitalize the first letter of each of the words on the title of your track, and then there's an underscore in between each word, you need to literally follow those specific instructions exactly, because that's how it's going to be inputted into Library X's platform and database. So they have to have it in the exact right format, and so that means you guys need to make sure you give it to me in the exact right format. So let's get started. So you have your full track here. Here's one track that I've composed. I'm just going to quickly walk you through some of the, pretty much every single type of bounce that you need to do. So obviously once it's done and you have the full mix here ready to go and it's been mastered and I've accepted it after all the notes I've given you, you just need to basically loop the entire track. Sometimes what I recommend to do is go to the very beginning of your track. You see how, like right here, usually when you have like a snap, it'll snap to the start of this. Now I have this loop that's playing right here. Usually what you're going to want to do is you're actually going to just drag this maybe just a tiny bit in front of it to make sure you catch any information that's going to be at the start of this wave file. And another thing you can do if you'd like to, just to make sure you have no audio clicks or pops, is you can put a little tiny fade in. So I have just like a 6-tick fade in there. You can also grab your little fade tool, whatever DAW you're using, and just do a little fade in right there. You don't want to hear a fade in though, right? You don't want to hear nothing like that, but it's just to get rid of any of a click or a pop or something like that. So if I click play, nice smooth intro, right? So, and then at the end, you need to make sure that all of your instruments are fading out so that you don't have any sort of like and then it just stops because the track stopped. So one way you can do it, which I've done, is any instruments or tracks that have some sort of tailing reverb or just a delay that might be going on and on, just fade them all out with your manual automation. And that's what I did with these volume fades here. Now that's one way to do it. The other way you can do it is you actually go to your, I don't know if you can see with my I'll put myself over here for a second. At least this is how you can do it with Logic Pro. Other DAWs, it's a different way. But if you click on your master bus here, this is right here, this master bus, you right click on it and you just create a track. It's calling EDM because that's the setting I was using, but we just call this our master. So this is now your master track actually. And when you click on A, at least in Logic, you can turn the display on. So now I have a volume for my entire track going on. So if I want to actually automate the end of my track completely, this is the master automation tool. I click right here, and let's say I find this is the end of the track up here at the 46 mark. So let's say I want to come back just a little bit. I don't want to have to fade right at the end, but maybe just literally a split second before that, and I turn it down. And that's one way you can actually have all of your instruments at the very end kind of all come down in uniform. So you can see it's a nice smooth fade out, okay? Some people, I don't want it to hear these kind of fade outs where it's like this close. You see how that felt really artificial and way too quick? Give me a little bit of space on that ending. Just let it fade out just a little bit. At least this is for the full mix we're talking about, okay? We might change things up in our cut downs like our 15, 30, and 60, but for the full, give me a nice smooth fade. Make sure your loop is obviously ending after the entire track has been faded out completely. And once you have all that ready to go and you've maybe gone through and made sure that the mix is where you want it, everything is working great, you're ready to bounce. Okay, so what we're going to do is in Logic, we're going to do bounce project or session. Now here's where you need to make sure you get your formatting right. Okay, so you need to make sure it's a wave. That's what we're looking for Library X. 24-bit, okay, not 16. You might have recorded it in 16. That's okay. At this point, you need to raise it up to 24-bit. You need to bounce these stems at the highest bit level so that if they need to go mix these stems, put something together, or mix the track in any way, they have the highest quality version to work with that. Now, in this one, I did this on purpose just to show you guys it's not the end of the world. I've obviously recorded this track in 44.1. This is the sample rate, okay? If you've done that, that's okay. In the future, you should start just setting your sessions to 48K. It'll just make your life easier. But if you've done it in 44K, it's not the end of the world. You just literally set it to 48. That's it, right? File type, you do it on interleaved. You don't want it split. Split will split it in 2 different files. You want it interleaved. Dithering, just put it on none. Don't worry about the dithering. I do mine offline. Some people think it's better for real time, or real time meaning it'll just go in the same time that the track takes. That'll take so long to have to listen through your 2-minute track or whatever it is. I just do offline. Normalize, I keep that off. And obviously we need the PCM settings here, not MP3, not M4A, none of the other things. Just make sure we're all there. Then we click on OK. Now here's where we're going to basically create a folder and then put all of our finals into that. So this is just the session folder that I've created for this what's it called? The session that I've been working on. So it's usually called bounces, and whatever you're using might be called bounces as well. What I usually like to do is I come down here and I'll click on new folder, and this is how you're going to format your folder. Okay, so you're just going to put your first, last name, a little hyphen there, and then you're going to put the track title. This one, I think I called this Classy Stroll. So that's what this one's called. Create a folder. Now we've got this folder here that you're going to be eventually zipping up and sending to me. Those are the finals that in this one folder. You'll have all of your stems, all of your finals and mix downs and cut downs, right? So now you have your folder completely labeled appropriately. Now we can actually title our full mix. And in order to do that, we just start with our track title, classy underscore in between your words, stroll. So if you have 3 words, you're going to have 2 different underscores. If you have 4 words, you're going to have 3 underscores, right? Just underscore everything. Another underscore. And then we're going to do our parentheses, and we're going to put F-U-L-L, capital F, lowercase U-L-L, okay? Just full. That means it's the full mix. Another underscore, and then you're going to put your first name, underscore, last name. Pretty complicated, right? Not too bad, but just make sure you're following these very basic instructions just to make sure the formatting is perfect, okay? Once you got that, just click bounce. As simple as that. Now, so you have your full mix down, right? That's the full mix. Nothing's muted. There's no alterations to it. So the next one we're going to do is do the no leads version, okay? I don't have any vocals in this track, but if you had any sort of a vocal lead or vocal shouts or any vocal instrument, you would also create that sort of alt mix, and that's the one where you would just sort of mute those out. You would just mute any vocal instrument or sounds that you have, and that you would call that the no vocals mix, okay? But let's continue on. Let's go to our no leads. Everybody's gonna have to give me this, so this is no leads. So if you listen to my last chorus, I'll show you where my leads are. Pretty much it's these strings. also these plucks. These plucks are high. So basically lead, it's not always necessarily just the thing that's taking the part of the lead, but any instrument that has a lot of high frequency information that could get in the way of a vocal, of a voiceover, of an actor speaking. Okay, so I'm gonna show you the difference. So here's the mix with everything. And then I'm gonna mute my strings and my plucks. By the way, having your tracks labeled appropriately and not having it called audio 4 will help you do this much faster. That's why you gotta have those good practices of setting up your sessions. It's like it's a different mix. It's just a different vibe. Without those strings, without that kind of intensity going on, the whole thing just feels a little more subdued, and you can actually more comfortably talk on top of it. Okay, so that's those 2 tracks muted. Now we have our no leads version. So whatever you're using, you got to use some judgment. Oh, and I forgot there was one other thing. So here, very high frequency kind of a run with those synths. That'll also get in the way of vocals, right? So I almost missed that one. That's why you got to double check your stuff. Make sure you're not missing anything. We're going to mute that as well. And so now we have our no leads version. So we're going to go ahead and bounce. Again, you're going to have to do this every time. That's why setting your session at 48K will make your life a lot easier. Otherwise, you have to do the setting every single time. So now we're going to keep everything as is. Same track title, of course, same composer. Now we're just going to literally type in the parentheses, no leads. Plural, okay? Capital N, capital L. You don't need the underscore in this section in here. I know it gets a little confusing, so just follow these guidelines, okay? So now that we're bouncing that one down, can you see me? Am I coming out of frame here? Let me just, there we go. If I stand down a little bit, you can actually see, make sure I'm not getting out of the way there. Once we have this one all bounced out, we're gonna then work on our drum and bass version of this track, which, as you can guess, is just your drums with any bass version that you had. Now I'm going to show you how to do that with this loop, because the loop that I'm using, it has a bass in it, but it also has kind of a pad, a kind of a cool pad thing. And I want to include a version of this track that's a little bit altered, and you might have to do something like this if you're using a pad, a loop, or something like that. So let me show you how I do it. So we're obviously going to keep our leads muted, right? Because we don't need leads for our drum and bass version. We just need drums and bass. So you keep those muted. Now we have this piano, so we don't need the piano. That's not a drum or it's not bass. And then I have these chords that are plucking, so we don't need that. So all we're left with is basically, here's all the drums. I usually put my drums in red. We have percussion, a ride, and our sound effects. So we have a riser, a crash, and a bass drop. I include those with my drums because they help add to the intensity of rising up to an impact and then crashing, and they kind of function as drums. So I always leave those in my drums and bass versions, and I think you guys should as well. It's basically your sound effects, right? You're gonna keep those in there. But if you listen to this loop in the beginning, you can hear there's a low sub in there, and then there's these high shimmering kind of sounds. I don't want those high shimmering sounds in a drum and bass section. Now, in the bridge of this song, though, I did create another version of this loop on a new track where I basically, as you can see, took out all the high frequencies. So this is literally just a sub sound now. Right, so I just have the bass frequencies in there. So what I'm gonna do, just for this drum and bass section, drum and bass version of the track, I'm actually gonna click and drag all of those down. Now, all of my loops are going to be just bass heavy, right? So when you go to my drums, it feels much more subdued, and it has a more of a drum and bass kind of a feel, rather than it being up here. See the difference there? That's the reason why we want to do that. So once that's all in place and we're happy with how it is, in my ending here, it's basically the same thing. I have sort of a reverb tail. It's a little bit more subdued as well. So we basically have that going on there. So I'm going to keep that in. So once we have that and it's kind of feeling how we want it, and we want to do a double check there, we go ahead and bounce again. Everything's the same. Come back to 48. Make sure it's 48. And this one, instead of typing out drums and bass, which a lot of people do, Library X just wants us to do capital D and B. No spaces, nothing like that. D and B. Drum and bass, right? Real easy, real simple. So we're going to go ahead and bounce that one out now. Now, before we go into our cut, this is usually, I'm walking you guys through the way that I do this just to make it much easier on myself. I usually start with full, go to no leads. Then if I have vocals, I go to no vocals. If I don't, I go to drum and bass. Now, after this, I do the stems because I already have my loop in the right section, right? My loop that I'm bouncing is the entire track. And now I can go through track by track, stem by stem, and bounce those out before I go to the 15, 30, 60, and sting, okay? So let me show you real quick how we're going to do these stems. Very easy. Now we're going to undo that, right? That's the one thing. If you move anything around for an alt mix, bring it back to where it originally was so your track comes back to how it's supposed to sound. We can unmute everything because we're done with all those alt mixes, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all three of these loops into one stem. Why? Because they're basically all the same sound, okay? This one's more of an open one. This one's more of a bass one. This is more open. But they're basically all the same part of the track, right? Even though this part goes from a high, shiny part to a subdued part, it's still where I want it to be. Now, what I need you guys to do is to kind of use your own judgment for where tracks might need to be appropriately grouped, okay? So this is one of those situations where you would. So what I would do is solo them all out, make sure everything obviously is looped for the entire track. Same thing, 48. Now here's the only one difference you're gonna do here. So rather than having all of these in the same folder, what you're gonna do is actually create a new folder. And you're just gonna capital letters, stems, okay? So your mixes are gonna be in this folder and you're gonna have another subfolder called stems. And this is really easy. Basically, you can call this pad, you can call it maybe bass and pad, and pad. I'll do a bass and pad. That's what it's going to be because that's going to basically be the one section. Now you can just, whatever you feel is the right title to do that, you need to do that, okay? So we're going to go ahead and bounce this now. So this is now becoming one instrument to send off to them. So if they want to, like, you know, if some clients like, you know, I love the sound they're kind of doing, this sort of like really shimmery sub sound. Can I just get that? That's why we deliver the stems, because that stem alone could get placed as an underscore in a TV show or some sort of a program. You need to give them those options, right? Now, everything else in here is pretty self-explanatory. I have these echoes, right? So these plucks, better over here, right? They're by themselves. So that's going to be its own stem, okay? I have these like high lead flutters. That's going to be its own stem, right? Piano will be its own, strings will have its own, these chords that I have will have its own. Those are all very unique, different instruments, so they need to have their own stem. Now, here's where it gets a little bit interesting. So kick it needs to have its one stem, unless you have very, very different sounds. But I basically have the same kick on two different tracks, and the kick accent is just sort of like the off tempo, the sort of swung feeling. I'll even play it for you here. You can kind of see how it works. That kind of secondary da-doom, those sort of secondary ones. It's the same sound though. I basically just took down the volume a little bit and I've swung that a little bit so it has a little bit more of a swung feel. But both of these need to be on the same kick stem. Okay, so you would basically solo both of those and group them and just call that stem kick or kicks if there's multiple kick sounds, okay? Snare obviously needs to be by itself. This is kind of a little drum loop. You can do a drum loop by itself, but if it's adding to something else, you need to group that with that other instrument, okay? But here's where you can basically start grouping things. So I have these hi-hats, which are basically two different loops. And then this one. They're basically both kind of like topper drum loops that I sort of took out the low end. I'm going to group those together. Those belong together. That's just going to be called hi-hat. Okay, and then I have this ride. A ride I want to keep separate because a ride is a separate instrument. Okay, so that's why we do that. Now, the other thing that I do is I group all of my sort of, I call them risers and impacts, right? So I have these risers here. So there's a riser, there's an 808 drop, and then there's a crash. I put those all together. I know some people want to put the bass drop by itself, but to me, it's all basically in the category of these are the things that are kind of adding to, they're not really musical elements. They're more sound effects that are enhancing the intensity, the emotions of the track. So I would group all three of those together. So if you have a lot of percussion, put all your percussion together, okay? If you have a lot of hi-hats, put all those together. If you have guitars, so if you have like 6 rhythm guitars, those need to all come together as just the rhythm guitars, right? And then if you have a lead guitar, that needs to be a separate stem. So just use your common sense of where things need to be grouped. You shouldn't have probably more than 10, maybe max 12 stems. So you should really be trying to squeeze down your session into as few stems that make sense as possible. And then of course you're keeping this loop in the same place the entire time so that when you go back and look at your stems, they're all the same length, right? They all need to be exactly the same length. So if somebody drags and pulls those into a DAW, they all automatically sync up and line up, okay? That's why you need to bounce it this way, not just like exporting, because sometimes when you export, it'll start from wherever the audio starts, and that means you're gonna have different length audio coming in, and that doesn't work, and that's not good. Okay, so we have the full versions and we have all the stems done. Now we're gonna go to the fun part, which is doing our 15s, 30s, 60s, and stings. Before we do that, make sure you get your DAW session to be in 29.97 non-drop frame, okay? That is the rate that you need to have your session. I'm gonna show you how to do it in Logic Pro. Whatever DAW you're working with, you're gonna have to just look at the user manual or look online. I'm sure there's some YouTube video or somebody out there that'll show you how to do this, okay? In Logic Pro, you come up to your menu, you click on record, you go to recording settings, and you go to synchronization, okay? So that's the steps to get there, right? Recording settings up here, and then on this menu, go to synchronization. Right here, frame rate. This is the frame rate that you need to make sure that you have. This is because Library X has clients that needs this frame rate for placements, okay? Not all libraries will ask you for this, but these guys are asking for you, and it's better that you know this stuff now, so if you're ever asked for it in the future, you're not like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I've never done this. It's no big deal, right? You might see two different sessions or two different options in yours. So you'll see this D, which is drop frame. Sometimes it's DF, or it actually will just say drop. You don't want that. No drop frame. You just want 29.97, or this one might say ND, non-drop frame, or NDF. Okay, that's what you want, non-drop frame, 29.97. And that's it. That's all you got to do. Just make sure it's on that. And then the second thing, you need to make sure in your metering up here, you do see the frames, okay? Sometimes when you get started, you might be seeing, you might be seeing the bars, right? Or the ticks, or you might be seeing other things right there. But you need to make sure that we can actually monitor what frame we're on so we can kind of keep track and make sure that we are following the guidelines that we need to. And I'm gonna show you how to do that. So you just go to, which one was it here? Navigate, record. I think it was in preferences. You go into Logic here, you go to general. And then you're going to go to, let's see, which one was it? Display. Yep, it's on display. So here's how you find it. So again, you go to Logic Pro, Preferences, General, and then you go to Display, or you can actually go directly there right here with Display. Now down here, you'll see Display Time As, okay? So you have all these options. Yours might be right now on hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, or samples. It might be by default up here. But what you need to do is you need to do SMPTE, without subframes. We don't need subframes. We just need frames, okay? With subframes gives you another level of complication that's not, it's going to make you confused. Just go without subframes. So whatever you're using, make sure you get SMPT readings without subframes, okay? If you can't disable subframes, fine, but at least you have the frames that you can go to, okay? So once you're there, now you're going to actually see, as you scroll through, you're going to see the frames up here, if you can see that. You're going to have the hour, the minute, the second, and the frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the longest cut down, which is the 60 second, and then work our way back. So we're going to go 60 seconds, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and then we'll do the sting finally. This is the trickiest part of delivering your final, so just make sure you pay attention, okay? What I usually do is I go to the very end of my track, wherever that is, and I have it here nicely ending at the 46th measure there. And I'm actually going to take notice of what this reading is saying, okay? So it says 1 minute, 59 seconds, 26 frame, okay? To get our 60 seconds, we need to go back in time from the end of our track, 60 seconds, right? But we need to make sure that we are within 5 frames of this 26 number. If that's confusing, I'll show you exactly. Don't worry about it. So let's do first this 59. So what would be 60 seconds before this? Well, it'd be not 159, but it would just be 0059. So if we can keep scrolling back, you can see we'll get to... There's 0, and then 59 is right about there. Now remember, this had 26. So 18 is pretty close, but obviously if we can get it closer to the actual 26, let's see if I can scroll in a little bit here. 20, 59, there we go. We're kind of there. There's 28 right there. So you can see that it said, at the end it said 01, 59, and we're at 00, 59. So this is exactly... with 2 frames difference, this is 60 seconds before. Okay, so this is the area that we should be thinking about starting to cut and duplicating to make our 60 seconds. So what I'm going to do is, because this is very close to the middle of this progression, you see this is kind of like a middle of a progression here. It was really close to that. I mean, we were right here, and all it takes is just a little bit further back to get to the start of this. Because if I started right here, like in the middle of it, it's kind of strange. When I'm talking about the middle, I mean from 19 to 27 here. You can see how this is an 8-bar progression. Starts right here. Middle of the way is right there. You can just see also with the way that I've cut, if I can zoom in here, the way that I've cut, you know, some of these loops that I'm using, this is the halfway point right there, right? So what I'm going to do to make this really easy and really simple and not get too complicated and have to do a bunch of editing, I'm going to basically take all of this right from the center of it, which would be at this 23 mark. I'm going to cut all of it. Okay. Now it's going to ask you, in Logic at least, I think most of them will do this as well. Do you want to keep what you're doing? Do you want to split what you're doing? I always use split. What split does is it basically says, if there was a long bar, a long note in between those two sections that I'm cutting, like right in the middle, keep would mean that like it's not going to keep the start. It won't keep the start of that MIDI. Splitting is the way that you need to split everything that you just did, so that if there's a new instrument starting, you get the start of that MIDI track. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, just do split. Don't worry about it. Keep it on split. So now we have this really cool thing. Now you're thinking like, well, Jesse, you went back a little way, so now you're actually longer than a minute. What do? Well, look at how long our outro is. We can actually do a lot to shorten that up. We don't have to have as long of a outro. We can kind of shorten that up to clean it up. So what I'm going to do is highlight everything and make sure we get the start of our session here. So here we go. So you can see that we have all of our tracks that are highlighted starting at this halfway point of that chorus. Now here's the one thing you might be careful of. So you can see what we cut this, but that actually is one kick track that I didn't really necessarily want to keep. So I'm going to mute that actually. You see how that was just like an accent kick that kind of goes do, 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 do. And I don't really need that to start. I don't want some sound starting right there. So I'm actually going to just start from right here. I can zoom out actually. I'm going to grab all my stuff now to the start of there. Make sure I got everything. There we go. So I don't want something that might be overlaying and bleeding into that section that's not really necessary. And that's not necessary because it belongs really in the previous measure. Once I have all this, I'm actually not going to just move all this. I'm actually going to hold down Option and copy and paste this over into a new sort of version of the track. Okay, so whatever you need to do to make sure you do that, you're copying and making another version. So now we have this whole thing, which as we know is going to be a little longer than 60 seconds, right? So let's go ahead and fix that. Why do we have, oh, now you got to be careful. Remember we had our thing fading out here. You got to make sure you come back up. Maybe over here. I'm going to go down and put that back up at 0. So we have volume that way. Okay. So just be careful if you're messing with the automation of the master. You can kind of go, what happened to my audio? It's just because it went down before. We never brought it back up. So here's what I'm going to do. We always start at the end of the track. So let's go to the end of the track. And we can see that we are at 3:33:04. If you go to the beginning of the track, 2:29. Okay, so 3:33 looks like we're about 4 seconds too long, right? From 2:29 to 3:33, it's about 4 seconds. That's not needed. So what I usually do is I come back 4 seconds. So we're gonna go 3:33. Let's go to 3:29, right? That would be 4 seconds. 3:29, somewhere around there. Let's see if I can actually get it to go right on 3:20. I want it to kind of land evenly on one of the, not maybe right on the measure, but close to something that's kind of like, this is halfway between 79 and 80. I like to have very even places to go and not these kind of random places in between a measure. So what I'm going to do is just to make this really easy, grab my master, make 2 little points. I'm going to drag this down so it's definitely faded out at the end of this, right? We always have this faded out at the very end. And then our fade out starting basically at the end. So let's just take a listen and see what this sounds like first. Nice. I'd actually even give this a little bit more space. Might want to bend this up a little bit. Let's see what that sounds like. Sometimes you might want to give yourself a little bit more volume. That feels a lot better. It's a lot more full, okay? So now that we're at the end here, let's get to the end. We are at 3:29:04. So if we went back 60 seconds, what would that be? 2:29:04. Let's see if we can do that. Well, there's 229.06 already. And like I said, you just want to be within basically 5 frames of the original one. So this is great. This is perfect. This is as tight as you could possibly want it. And again, rather than just starting right on the top, I'm going to probably just drag it over just a little bit. Give it a little bit of that bleed in just to make sure that we're not getting any clipping. If you have audio files or anything like that, sometimes what you might want to do, like I have these 3 audio files actually and the loop, is I'll just go in and do this one fade thing. Just a one fade, okay? Again, just take care of the audio clips and pops, nothing. I don't want anybody to do a full fade. Like I don't want you coming into your master and doing something like this where you're like, okay, there's the start of my track. No, we're not doing any fade-ins. We're not doing anything fancy like that. We need to just have music starting immediately when the track starts, okay? And then the one last thing I want to say is just make sure that you have music going pretty much all the way to the very end of your track. I've had some composers, like their track ends here, and then it's just fading out, and then for the last like 5 seconds, there's like nothing there, or even like 3 seconds, there's nothing there, it's just silence. Unacceptable. There needs to be music from start to finish of the entire 60 seconds. So if you have a lot of space, you might have to get creative. Maybe in the beginning, you're like, hey, I got like 2 bars, I have nothing there. Go find a drum fill from your track, throw it in there. Go find another section of your track. Try to craft something to just make it feel a little bit more full so you don't have any silence. Because if you have silence, I'm going to definitely kick it back to you and say, redo it, okay? Don't give me that homework. Just get it right the first time. Sometimes it doesn't work as easily as this one worked out. And if it doesn't, you have to get creative with how you make sure that you fill it out. It doesn't matter that, like, as you can see, we don't have the full chorus here. We do have the full sort of breakdown and build up into the last chorus, but you don't have to have full sections of anything. Just make sure that the music is there, right? And give us a good chunk of what's happening in your chorus. That's pretty much the main thing to remember. Okay, so obviously, I'm sure you guys can figure out how we're going to label this one. Let's make sure we do 48 again. We have the markers where they need to be. We've, checked that out. Now we're going to go back to our main folder up here. So let's just click on, let's say, the full one, so we don't have to retype everything again, right? Just go ahead and replace full with 60. Hit done. Very easy. Very, very, very easy. Okay, and now because you've double checked with your frames and you have the right frame rate in your session, you're going to for sure make sure that this is going to be exactly 60 seconds. Now, in order to make sure, let's go back and double check it. So we're going to go to music. This one, sleek design, bounces, there they are. So here's the ones that we've created already. So I'm going to just double check. I'm going to go click play, see what it looks like. 1 minute exactly. Start sounding good. Let's check the outro. I'm even not comfortable with having that 2 seconds of kind of silence there. So what I'm going to do is give my outro more music. Okay, so if you find yourself there's like, there's a little bit too much space there, pull up your fade out, let it just breathe a little bit more. Pull this over, see what that sounds like. That one feels a little bit better to me, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and rebounce that. Hey, you gotta do it sometimes, right? Just make sure you get it right. Double check things before you send it off. Just keep it the same title, just replace the old one. And when it's done, go back and listen to it. Listening to what you do is what will separate you from the amateurs out there. All right, let's go ahead and take a listen to that, what we just did. This one, here we go. That feels better. We got music going all the way up until the last second. Okay, that's how you should do it. And obviously you're seeing this 1 minute right there. So everything is working out nice and clean, okay? Now the second one we're gonna do is going to be our 30-second version, okay? So this is where we can actually, it'll be a lot easier as this goes on. You'll get better at this. It might be hard for you in the beginning, but you'll get definitely better at this. So we're gonna keep it where it is. We're at 3:29:04, so what would be 30 seconds before that? 2:59, right? If this was 3:30, then it could be just 3 flat, but because we got that 29, so it's 2:59:04 is what we're looking for. So 2:59. So we're just before basically the start of this chorus. So what do? Well, we're kind of really far, away from the middle of this, and we're really close to the start of this sort of transition. So what I do in a situation like this is I'll pretty much grab my looper here, my loop section, and try to figure out a way to just use this kind of riser. I have this kind of rising impact here that gets us started into that chorus, and that'll be the start of my 30-second cue. So I kind of like just starting it right there, and that's sort of like my little intro, you know, whatever this is, 1 bar thing until we have this nice rise up. So what I'm going to do is cut this right here. I'm actually going to go through and all these before it, I'm going to mute them, okay? And now I have basically just the start of what I want to do here to lead into the chorus, and I'm going to use a little fade, like a 1 or 2 fade over here. Nothing like, you know, nothing like that. Just enough that if there's a click or a pop or anything like that. So not a bad little intro, right? Just gets us started into this final chorus. Let's remember we were at 3:29, so we need to be at 2:59:04. 2:59. So again, you can see that we are a little bit long because now it's going to 2:58. So what I'll do like this, because, you know, cutting this in half, I mean, I could do, I guess, 2:59. I don't really like that as an intro. I kind of like the music playing. I like the music playing like that. So what I'm going to do is actually just shorten the outro a little bit, okay? So now if I need to shorten that outro, I go to the beginning. Where are we starting at? 2:58:15. So what would be 30 seconds past that? 3:28:15. So I go to 3:28:14. Close enough, right? Because we're within 5 frames. We drag our thing back here. I'm make sure you guys can see what I'm. Yeah, you guys can see what I'm doing. We're gonna drag this one back. Let me see what this sounds like. Clean, super clean, right? Not much to it. Nice. And again, remember before the beginning, I want to just drag this back just a smidge to make sure we're capturing any transient information or anything like that. There we go. And now we're ready to go for our 30. And again, this might be taking you longer than it's taking me. You might be getting confused and it's like, oh my gosh, this is going to be crazy. It gets easier and easier every time you do this, guys. And it's just something you're going to need to learn, because if you come across a library and they say, hey, give us your 15s, 30s, and 60s. I need it 29.97. I need it this way. I need it that way. You're not going to panic and go, I'm not prepared for any of that. That's why you're in the syndicate. That's why you're part of this group, is because you will be prepared for those situations. But we always go back and listen to what we did. Okay, so let's take a listen. So there we go, exactly 30 seconds. We have music lasting all the way to the very end. We obviously have the right formatting, so we're double checking our work. Really, really important, guys. Very, very important. All right, 2 more mixes and we're done. So it will come down to the end here. So again, we went to 30, now let's go to 15. I'll even keep, usually I just keep the outro as it is. Like the outro is the one thing that I can kind of like mess with if I need to get the timing right. So that's the one sort of puzzle piece, Lego piece that you can kind of make longer, shorter as you need to help you with your timing, okay? So let's go to 15 seconds. So we're at 3:28:14. What's 15 seconds before that? Well, 18 would be 10, and then 13 would be 15. So 3:13 with 14 frames. 3:13:14. 3:13. There it is. 3:13:14. So it looks like we're pretty close to the halfway mark, right? You can see this is the halfway mark of my course. So I want to basically start at the halfway mark. That makes it easier for me to do this. So let's just find out what that is and let's adjust the outro. So again, the first thing, if you don't need to cut anything, yeah, I'm going to need to definitely cut a couple of things. I need to cut these 2. I'm going to split them. Need to cut this. And then we're going to mute everything before it. Okay. Now we have an issue there because that was all the same. Cut that, unmute it, make sure we got it. Cool. Grab all my audio. Oh, I don't want this one. Remember, this is the one that's kind of bleeding from the previous measure. Grab all this stuff, even my loop. I want to just do a 1 quick little fade in to maybe 2. That's it. Okay, so where are we at here? 3:11:24. So let's go 30 seconds after, or 15, sorry, 15 seconds after 311. So that'd be 21, then 26, 24. So 326, 24 is the magic number. 326, 24, right there. This one we can probably get it right on par. So what do? Go to your master. Make sure you guys can see this. Go to your master, drag it back right there. This one, maybe you want to have it a little bit steeper just because it's a quicker fade out, and that's okay. You can have some quicker fade outs for your cut downs, and they don't all need to be completely just smoothly coming out for a long time. If they need to be a little short, that's fine, but as long as they feel as natural as possible. That's not bad, actually. I think I might do it a little bit faster. I feel like it needs to just kind of get quieter faster. Let's see. Yeah, that's not bad. Actually, I like that. Do one more. Do one more. There you go. That's nice, right? It's a little bit quicker than all the other ones, but it still feels natural. It doesn't feel like we went, and it just rushed out of there. Okay, we definitely don't want that kind of an ending. We want it to feel as natural as possible. And again, we just take our beginning here, drag it back just a bit. And people, you might be wondering, like, well, if you drag it back, aren't you changing the frames? You're doing this, like that amount of drag is not going to take you out of the timing that you need for this kind of thing. We're talking about literally like milliseconds, like nothing to change you for that. So we go to 48. Of course, you guys can probably guess. We're going to call this one 15. Bounce it, but don't just move on. Go take a listen, because if you need to make a change, you have it all looped up here to make your 15. Killer. I can probably even give it a little bit more space because it faded out a little quick. So you know what I might do is I might make another move right here and just kind of have the music fade for a while until it's completely done. You see how I kind of do that just to give it a little bit more time to just have some more music, and then at the very end, boom, we're out. So we don't have to worry about anything cutting off at the end of the mix. So let's try to replace that one and see what that one sounds like. Here we go. It's still even coming out a little bit too fast, so I think I might give it a little bit more. And just have that really come at the very end, even raise that up. So you got to take your time with this stuff, guys. You want to have a really good sounding thing. Something like that. Let's give it a shot. 15, we will replace that. And this is what I do, guys. I make sure that everything is just perfect before I send it to any of my library licensing companies or partners, because I don't want them having to do any homework. There you go. I like that a lot better. So it's coming out basically right to the very end. So giving them as much music as possible. No dead silence, nothing like that. All right, last but not least, let's do our sting. The sting is very, very easy because you don't have to now worry about the timing. So a sting doesn't have to be 5 seconds, 10 seconds. But usually it is going to be shorter, obviously, than your 15 seconds. So a sting is usually 5, maybe 10 seconds at the max. So basically what I do is I always just kind of use the last riser, or the sort of last part of my track that rises up and then crashes at the very end. So here we are in the right section to be able to do that. So let's just take a listen. So what I'm going to do is probably just take this last chorus, or this last loop right here. Now, this ending is a little fast. We don't have to worry so much about having the time constraint. So let's go ahead and stretch that out a bit. And actually remove this one. And let's give it a little bit more time to breathe. Let's see what this sounds like. That feels about natural right there. So we'll have it end right there. Again, we were going want to do this bar. So everything before this. Again, we want to cut this if we need to cut something. Everything before this can be muted out. That's not even playing, doesn't matter, that doesn't play. Then we have our audio, right? We want to get our audio ones nice and faded in, do a little one fade, get any pop. The other thing you can do, this kind of start is a little bit strange, so sometimes what I might want to do is just have a little bit of a drum fill into it. So let's just see what the drums are doing here. Just drums though, I just want to have a little drum fill. So here's what I think. I like these drums just, I like that boom, pow, and then just starting it. So I like having a little bit of a drum fill sometimes, just something that kind of like boom, bah, gets it kicked off, and it's not just, whoa, out of the blue, music is there. So I'll probably give myself a little bit of space. I'm capturing this kick right here. And you might need to adjust things if there's another drum fill somewhere earlier in the track and you think that'd be a great way to do it. I mean, if this 808 drop would be kind of cool. Let me see. Don't know if that would work. Boom, bow. Let's just see. This could be there, but I don't know. It's a little bit strange. Actually, I don't mind that at all. I kind of like that. So again, this is where you can kind of get creative and make it sound really interesting so that it captures the attention of a supervisor or an editor or somebody that wants to shop your music. There you go. Clean. The sting's really easy to do. We got 48. We can just call it a sting. And biggity biggity bounce, as I always say when we're done with that. So that one's a real quick one. Let's just make sure that all sounds good. Beautiful. A little bit of space at the end there, so I might want to just give it, shorten it a bit, and then give it a little bit more volume. So I'll probably bring this back a bit. Even a little bit more. Let's give that one a shot. Let's see if that's a little better. Again, you don't want to have, the sting is not as important just because for having the timing. It's an important mix, but it's not as important for the timing because it doesn't have to fit 1350 or 13. My brain is going, guys. Sorry, 15, 30, 60, right? It can be 11, 10, 9. Killer. So again, just make sure you're double checking. Everything's labeled right. Everything's exactly what I want it to be. The stems are all there. We didn't do all the stems just to kind of save time, but those stems should all be in there. Just title what they are, drums, piano, right? You don't need to have all caps. You don't need to put the track title and this and that. Put all the stems, just what the stems are. They'll all be included in this final one. And when you're all done, you're just going to compress this final folder. And then you're going to send it to me either through Dropbox or Google Drive, however it is that you can get them to me. And then just make sure that you give me basically one file that has all of your stuff, and make sure you don't send it to me until you're 100% certain that they are good to go. So please double check your stuff. Please don't give me homework. Don't make me do things for you or come back to you and say, please, redo this. You didn't do this right. It's a big bummer for me, and I really want to train you guys to start catching your errors and your issues before you ever send it off to anybody in this business. It's how to ensure you're going to be very successful in the long run. So I hope this helped. If you have any further questions, just email me, okay? Just ask me a question if something's really confusing and you still can't figure this out. I'll do my best to help, but this is the kind of stuff you guys got to figure out how to do, and hopefully this tutorial enabled you to do such a thing.